Previously on Get In The Mecha. The media is a great way of escaping, and I think with anime and manga which are often based in, or although we do have pieces which do reflect life a lot more, we do have the blessing of having pieces which are really distanced from reality. And that can be really fun, or at least really beneficial and really good on the mind for escaping the crazy reality which we live in right now. I'm Jamal, and you're listening to Get In The Mecha, your weekly anime and manga analysis podcast. From inspiring arcs to game-changing cinematography, I'm on a journey to try and make sense of it all, episode by episode. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Get In The Mecha, and in today's episode we are talking about the anime which I've been watching in lockdown. As you can tell by the title of this episode, or maybe the thumbnail, we are back in lockdown here over in the UK and in London. I'm not very surprised, to be honest. And I think it is also a good time to reflect on the anime that I've been watching during this time. As you heard probably in the previously section, I watched a bunch of anime in the lockdown, and that was a time where I didn't actually have as many things to juggle during that time, but now I'm kind of a lot more busy while watching anime too, so my viewing patterns and logic sort of has changed quite a lot in between these two episodes. And I really just want to follow up on this one. It has been a bit of a tough week for me to record this episode. Not only just throughout the week, I've just had a lot of stuff to do, but also I had a bunch of technical issues to even set up this episode in itself, so that wasn't the best thing, but luckily I'm going to try and keep this one short and also quite new viewer friendly. And by the way, if you are new to Get In The Mecha, I kind of made it clear, I'm Jamal. I like to think about anime really hard, even though in this episode I'm not really thinking about it very hard, just talking about what I really enjoy. As I kind of alluded to, I want to make this episode short and sweet, and so let's just get into it. Here is the episode for this week. That is episode 81 of Get In The Mecha. My Lockdown Picks version 2. On the show, I like to make sure that I don't give out spoilers unwarranted, and so within this episode, I will be, as always, giving you a spoiler alert, and for this case, there shouldn't be spoilers from what I understand, even though, okay, there's one thing I can think about, and that is, for an anime which I will mention later, there are spoilers for the first episode, because it kind of sets up the rest of the narrative, but I don't want to give that away too soon, because I want to keep you guys engaged, so you listen to the end as to what I've been speaking about. I'm going to basically tackle this episode the way I did last time, even though it's not particularly doing a manga, an anime, and a manhwa, but this time I'm just going to talk about 3 anime, but these 3 anime are pretty different. I didn't want to say throw in 3 battle-shounen anime, or 3 just action anime, or 3 idol anime. That will make a lot more sense later, but I kind of wanted to just add a bit more variety to this because I want this episode to actually be quite friendly to new anime viewers as well who are maybe looking for something to watch, and I'm not particularly the recommendation king. There are way better places you can go for recommendations. I do watch a good combination of what is popular and what is maybe a bit more obscure, and I also just watch a bunch of stuff on a whim too, so I don't know if I'm the best for recommending, but if you maybe do get value from this, that would also really help, or I hope that helps you quite a lot. Probably the highlight of my anime lockdown experience has probably been Golden Boy. I'm saying Golden Boy partially because I'm pretty sure that I talked about ghost stories in another episode, or if not, it was kind of before I did the Lockdown Picks episode, and so I've kind of forgotten about ghost stories for now, but Golden Boy is kind of what was recommended to me after watching this dub of ghost stories, which was insanely funny. And so if you haven't heard of Golden Boy is basically about a guy called Kintaro Ue, and what he basically does is tours Japan learning about life. He graduated from what I believe was Tokyo University with everything he needed besides actually graduating, and so he dropped out and then decided to just sort of tour Japan and take up all these odd jobs. That sounds sort of too simple, and of course there's a catch. He does get into a bunch of, let's call them, risque scenarios, and it is pretty funny, but this anime isn't one for everyone. As much as it does fit into the comedy and quote-unquote ecchi genre, it also does fit into this like personal subgenre that I like to call the outrageous dub category, where I have ghost stories in there, I have hensuki in there, and I also now have Golden Boy in there. By outrageous dub, I'm not criticizing it. If anything, I just think that the dub just makes it a lot more funny, because with the majority of humor taking place in Japanese, something which I'm assuming the majority of Western viewers don't necessarily speak or read, and as a result, I think there is a bit of a disconnect to the humor. There is still some very, very funny stuff, and I've watched some very funny stuff that's in Japanese, of course, but I think with some of these dubs, like ghost stories like Hensuki, and now with Golden Boy, because some of the things they say is so outrageous, and so I can't believe someone's actually saying this to me while watching a show, actually saying this. It feels a lot more surreal. It hits much harder, and that is why I recommend such a show like this in dub alongside the other two I mentioned. If you're really just into off-the-walls humor, where you can be sort of hit by anything no matter the circumstance and just laugh it off anyway, I think this is a good show for you, because you're going to be hit with a lot of things that you might not necessarily see coming, but they end up being really funny. And I generally just love the approach of the show from that perspective. There is no sort of aim, similarly to Ue's approach. He doesn't have an aim in life, and equally the show doesn't really have an aim. It just tours us around some random places and some random scenarios. I do like the final episode. I'm not really gonna spoil it, but I really do like how the final episode ties everything together as well. Something which I do wish a lot of final episodes for some of these OVA series really did, and it really depends on the context, obviously, but with something like this where you have a bunch of random scenarios, it's really cool to sort of just link it all together and remind you that this is what you watched and this is what you watched all this comedy for, but it just all works out basically, in my opinion. Golden Boy also reminds me quite a lot of what I miss about older anime. I wasn't particularly around when this was out or watching anime when Golden Boy was out, so I'm not gonna act as if oh man, I miss the old days, because I've only been watching anime for about 5 years or so, about 6 years, maybe, about 5. But even so, what I like about the approach of older anime is how there's a lot more focus on form and difference within form. Not like we don't have that today. We have anime music videos, we have many more commercials which are anime related. We of course have the classic TV series and films and stuff like that. There is variety, but I like the sense of variety that exists in the early 2000s and 1990s, for example, like the anthologies where we have a bunch of shorts within that. Or in the case of Golden Boy, we have a 6-episode OVA. Like right now, I'm even watching a 90s JoJo OVA that's about 6 episodes, I do believe, and then there's another one which is about 8 or 9. I feel like that's just a lot rarer these days, and it's quite unfortunate because it provides us a lot more flexibility for the time which we have, and me, who's been quite tight on time recently, can really appreciate something like a 6-episode OVA. It takes less commitment and it feels a lot more manageable to get through. If you know that you have 6 episodes, you can watch 6 episodes across 6 weeks, you can watch 6 episodes across one day, you can watch 6 episodes across 1 week, and it's really sort of considerate, I think, to the viewer in a really indirect way. As I said before, this anime isn't one I would recommend to everybody, but if you do want to get into a sort of outrageous, ecchi comedy anime, this is a good one to start with, maybe not to start with, but it's one to watch, because you don't have too much to commit to. You have 6 episodes of about 30 minutes. I do believe these are slightly more extended because of the format which they're in, rather than sort of the TV format of today, which is about 23 minutes. These go to about 27 to 30, I think. So it's a good choice, I think, if you are just looking to get into this sort of weird subgenre of comedy. The second anime here, and probably the most popular, which I have on my lockdown list or lockdown picks, is Jujutsu Kaisen. If you are pretty interested in Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'm sure there is someone in the audience right now that is, then I do recommend checking out my other Jujutsu Kaisen episodes, or related things. I do have one on some of the animators and staff on Jujutsu Kaisen, as well as the Unskippable Openings episode, which kind of talks about it for a bit of time in there as well. So if you do want to see that, then there should be, on the YouTube thing, there should be some things at the end of this podcast, and then you can obviously go through the RSS feed if you are on audio. But what exactly is Jujutsu Kaisen about? And I'm not going to say that thing where people are like, if you've been living under a rock, like, I'm not going to do that, because I'm sure there is someone that doesn't actually watch Jujutsu Kaisen, and I think that is fine. This is an opportunity to maybe get into it. It's just, this is like the very popular battle-shounen at the moment. Jujutsu Kaisen concerns a boy called Yuji Itadori and him sort of spiraling into this crazy world of curses, things which he only thought existed in the sort of mystical occult world, and to find out they are real after this sort of weird encounter with the quote-unquote king of curses being Sukuna that goes inside of him because he actually ate one of his fingers, and now he's living this really, I want to say weird again, but I'm just gonna say really strange life, of which he has a curse inside of him, and he's been sort of plunged into this world of curse politics and battles between curses because he really just jumped into it. He then joins the Jujutsu Technical School to sort of hone his skills and really understand this curse society, and there's a lot going on, but it's also very entertaining. I'm describing it in a very bad way. I might be even giving it a bad reputation, but I mean that with like the best intentions possible. I'm genuinely being positive about this anime because it really grew on me. When I first watched it, initially I was like, okay, this is okay, and okay, maybe I don't like it to the extent to which I like other anime, but for a seasonal anime or seasonal battle shonen, I've never really been this engaged before. Battle shonen on a seasonal level isn't something I really watch too much of, besides maybe Fire Force. But overall, I'm kind of a lot tamer on it. Okay, I did watch The God of High School as well, but generally speaking, I'm not too involved in the battle shonen wave when it comes to seasonal anime. I usually watch them once they're finished, and even so, with a lot of the Jump properties, they haven't been coming out as fast as I thought they would. Even though now we're going to get Chainsaw Man, I believe, this year, if not next year. I forgot the date, honestly. What I am trying to say is that this anime wasn't one which immediately got me in and engaged, but I actually waited a bit, and then I caught up on some of the episodes, and I started to realize that this show actually has a lot of potential, and it really manages to act on a lot of this potential. There are quite a few enjoyable things about this anime for me. One of them would obviously be Satoru Gojo, like one of the other main characters of this entire story, the strong guy basically, but also just insanely like sarcastic and funny at the same time. I also am a very big fan of Yuji too. I don't really talk about characters very much on this podcast, if I'm completely honest with you. Besides maybe Evangelion characters, but that's really for the sake of like understanding absurdism and stuff, but I usually keep it very distant when I talk about characters, but I actually really do like Yuji as a character. With Battle Shonen, I think there is sometimes, personally, I get a bit bored of the doesn't think before they act type. There isn't anything wrong with that, and there are many characters within that sort of list which I really do enjoy. But I've often enjoyed also having protagonists that kind of just go against this norm and have a bit more agency, if that makes sense. It's, again, I'm not calling Yuji the big brain or something, or Shinra from Fire Force the big brain, but I do get a bit of fun out of just not having that sort of same logic to go through once again like I have with a lot of other battle shonens. Another great perk of Jujutsu Kaisen, and probably the main one for someone like me, is that it's been very exciting to watch from an animation sort of analysis perspective. As someone that's really into this sort of stuff on talking about animators and directors and episode directors and storyboards, which I'm still learning every single day about. But it's been such a fun experience to learn about new animators, see animators that I really like touch a project like this, see a lot of freelancers as well getting involved in such a project. So I love the diversity within Jujutsu Kaisen as a production. So from one of my favorite animators and now directors, Shingo Yamashita, directing both openings. Hey, and they both turned out phenomenally, honestly. I couldn't ask for any more. To, again, some really great animators and action animators that I really like, from Keishiro Watanabe, to recently even Takeshi Mainami entering this project. But my point is that there's a lot to take from JJK that isn't just the actual anime itself and the actual narrative and content and story, but it as a piece of media, sort of, and as an animated work, it's also insanely rich in that area too. And then my final thing just on JJK is that I've had a really good time appointment viewing. It has been very enjoyable, and I can highly recommend watching anime week by week, which come out week by week, or just new anime that come out like that. I understand not everyone has the time, and obviously do what suits you. That I do the same as well, I do what suits me. But even just saving it for a time that's very close to the air date, I think can be equally enjoyable. Like, if we take, and I'll get to it later, I watch Attack on Titan often on Mondays as opposed to Sundays, but it's usually Monday mornings just before I start doing like studying and everything like that. But it's very enjoyable just to have a very specific time to watch a thing, and you remember everything which happened from the last week by watching that episode, because it sort of reminds you of everything. And that it's just a really fun experience as opposed to just watching everything in a row and having the constant hit of adrenaline. But I do understand that that is something that people do enjoy too. So my point with Jujutsu Kaisen is really great stuff to take from it, both as a story and as sort of an animation. And I would also recommend maybe watching it week by week, but do what suits you. And I think if this episode is going to be posed towards newer anime fans, this is probably the best thing you'll get from me, and that is just to do what you enjoy. Watch shows how you enjoy to watch shows. I'm sure you've done that before with things that aren't anime. But watch what you want and when you want. But that is what is so awesome about a meta like this. You can watch so many things and you can kind of do it when you like to. My final anime that I picked out for the session, you never know, I could actually do another one of these. This is a very fun and relaxed episode to do. It's also a very quick one also, but of course I do want to stick to the analytical stuff, but let me get back to the actual anime. So the last one, which I'm going to talk about, is Idly Pride. This is also a seasonal anime that is airing currently right now when this is being recorded, so that is in the winter of 2021. You might be listening to this way into the future, so I just wanted to make that clear. I did say that there will be spoilers for episode 1, or there'll be a very specific point, which is it's the first episode that really defines everything coming afterwards, so if you really don't want to know and you want to watch Idly Pride, then I recommend skipping this part and skipping any part you see fit. But firstly, let's get into what this show is about, and it concerns, as you can tell, idols. Just looking at my notes, and I prepared very quickly for this episode, and I took a screenshot of the Mao page. I'm not reading them verbatim, but I'm taking prompts from it, and I find it very intense, actually. I'm actually just going to read out an excerpt. It says on the synopsis, "To become an idol, I shed blood, sweat, and tears. Even so, I push on. I want to shine. I want to earn it. I want to become number one. I want to smile. I want to make my dreams come true. I want to look back at a sea of people. I want to be noticed. I want to find. I want to overcome obstacles. I only have pride in my chest." there's nothing actually wrong with that. I'm not going against it. If you're that passionate about becoming an idol, that's amazing, and you should pursue it if that's the case. But for what the show is, I didn't see that coming at all, because that sounds like something out of Dance Moms, for example, or just something really existential. It went from I want to be an idol to I want to be noticed, I want to be loved. And I found it very extreme, but as you could tell, the show concerns becoming an idol, basically. And here is where the spoiler part comes in. So what I will call our main character, Makino, decides to, or at least a girl approaches him in his class called Mana and wants him to make her an idol or be her manager, and then they end up sort of running up to the top. They graduate high school together, they keep doing things, and they eventually just become one of like the greatest, or Mana becomes one of the greatest idols sort of ever, according to this system of competition which they have. But then one day, unfortunately, she dies in a car crash, which I actually really didn't expect, to be honest. And yeah, it's pretty sad. He still works for the company, but then after that, the show basically concerns him seeing her ghost and him training his or her sister and a bunch of other prospective idols. And I like it still. I know that made it sound as if it was some bad show, but it is actually really enjoyable and laid back. It's not as if it's sort of trying to drown you in the trauma of Mana died, this is her ghost, because she's actually just like she was before her death. It's kind of like having the character around, just, yeah, she's technically not alive, but she's still very enjoyable to have around, and the dynamic sort of feels quite normal. That does mean it depends on a lot of, oh wait, I was talking to a ghost in front of people, oh wait, sort of thing that happens quite a lot. But that being said, it is still quite an enjoyable show to me. I have one big qualm, and it isn't even directly related to the show, but it's that on my anime list, and they fully deserve it, they put all the main characters as in the idols as main characters, but the real person that is really at the fore of this anime is the manager. And they put him as a supporting character, which I really don't agree with. Yes, he is technically a supporter in literal terms. He supports the girls' dreams because he is their manager, but the manager in this case is pretty much central to what is going on. He is just as prominent as anyone else, if anything more prominent, because he is who can see Mana's ghost, and it just works so well as in him being the main character, kind of for once, rather than like the idols taking the lead. And I just find it really weird, because that's sort of what happens in the music industry to an extent, where yes, you have a singer, a really good singer and artist, but the producer might get credit, but you know, some of the people behind the scenes, some of the engineers aren't the ones getting this very big credit. They're not the ones getting the platinums or whatever, but they're still just as important, but they get sort of put more on the back burner. And I feel like that's exactly the case with what happened in this anime right here on my anime list, which I just found really funny. And that is still severely unrelated to the anime itself, but I just wanted to raise that. Back on track to the anime itself, despite the fact that because these idols still know who Mana is, as in they can't particularly see who or where she is because she's a ghost, obviously, but people know of Mana, and as a result, she has quite a presence within this world, and they're sort of constantly talking about her in front of her sister, and although she seems to be okay with it, I just get really I don't know, it doesn't really sit right with me if someone's constantly discussing it so much, because it's pretty much the central part of this anime, really, her in part and her legacy, but also it just must feel so uncomfortable. But that being said, that's anime for you. I'm not really gonna try and correct the plot, because it's not really about me in this case, but I just found that a bit weird about it sometimes. It is a very wholesome anime. I can watch this and sort of relax my brain You still have to listen and pay attention. I take that as a principle for almost every show and anime in existence, or almost any piece of media. It's good to pay attention to it. But it's very effective for just kicking your feet back and watching some idols just learn and want to achieve their dreams and improve episode by episode. There's also quite a lot of 2D dancing animation as well, which really impressed me. Apparently 2D dancing animation isn't very common on anime, and so to see that on an anime or an entire genre which I'm pretty new to, a sort of a whole subgenre which I'm very new to, was pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie, it did feel like, or in my head it was like, this is probably the standard, but when you consider that dancing animation seems, from what I would assume, to be very hard, as in it's a lot of subtle movements, it takes a lot of reference. So when you consider it like that, having 3D dancing seems perfectly fine and feasible and understandable. You see it all the time on stuff like Love Live and stuff, from what I've seen of them from the sort of outside view. But actually watching an anime with 2D on sort of my first idol anime was actually a really awesome thing. Idol anime, weirdly enough, reminds me quite a lot of sports anime. It kind of does make a bit of sense, actually. It does relate to physical activity, that's a start, but also it concerns reaching your dreams and reaching new heights, and with anything which takes intense practice and repetition and refinement, that is really the themes which get involved and the feelings which get involved too. And I feel like I'm watching Haikyuu, but watching idols instead. I don't really mean that in a comparison of quality or anything, but I just mean the very core concept of trying to improve, trying to get better, and trying to reach somewhere higher. And that is exactly what I feel about this, and I think that will be the case for a lot of other idol anime too. It does kind of, I've heard a thing on how sport is like a really good insight into the human condition, and I completely agree with that. I think idol anime can do a similar thing, but it kind of also does get mixed with this idea of how do I respond to the audience, and do I want to be noticed, I want to be recognized amongst people, because your talent isn't only what speaks for itself, as in, yes, you can dance really well, but if you don't have a quote-unquote bubbly personality or a good personality according to the landscape, then you're not really going to go very far. And that's probably where it differs to sports anime. If you win the points, you win the points, but the points are a lot more subjective in idol anime, which I really think is going to take a very interesting turn, considering I'm sort of overanalyzing this potentially, and I have never really watched an idol anime before, so do bear with me. I am sort of getting used to it all, but this can make for a really interesting discussion. I don't know if anyone's even discussed idol anime sort of through the lens and framework of sports and competition, so maybe that's something we'll do as I watch a lot more of these series. So I don't get too off track, that is the episode for this week. There aren't really many things to say, and I'm not going to bother doing a whole closing thoughts segment. I do want to say though, for anyone who's either just new to the podcast or even new to anime, that there's a lot out there, and these are just 3 things which I've really been enjoying. I do recommend checking them out if this is what you're into. And I wanted to just give a bit more variety as opposed to maybe just putting things that I really like only. Or when I say really like, I more mean just, my favorite anime. I think there's a lot of value to get from things which someone's watching in a very specific moment, because they chose it more because of the timing and they thought they'll be interested in it, as opposed to knowing and confirming their interest. So I hope this episode maybe was a bit more valuable than the last lockdown pick, which was a bit more oriented to the anime during lockdown, which I loved the most, as opposed to this one, which was really just some things which I had been enjoying kind of, and still getting to grips with in the lockdowns. Thank you for listening to this episode of Get In The Mecha. That has been episode 81. It has been pretty difficult, battling with a lot of things that I need to write and to create and all of that, but I did enjoy this one actually. It was very chill and just fun to really speak my mind, and not like I don't do that in other episodes, but maybe not to the same extent because I'm usually following a bit of an outline, being a bit rigid, trying to stick to time. But it's just been nice to really just chat, even though it has been very one-sided. But speaking of one-sided, if you want to give your input, see how I did that there? Yeah. If you want to give your input, then you can do so by a few ways actually. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That'd be super appreciated. Tell me if you enjoyed this episode. Say you enjoyed episode 80, or you decided to watch one of the anime which I said that I've been watching too, like Jujutsu Kaisen or Idly Pride, or even Golden Boy. Feel free to do that. That would be very appreciated, and it also helps other people get to the show too. If you are on YouTube, if you could do all the YouTubery things, so liking, subscribing, pressing the bell if you want to get these on time, commenting as well. My comment section is super dry, and that is in part my fault. But I'd also love to chat to some of you guys in the comments too. And then the final thing is something which I've been pushing a lot more, and if you really think someone can get value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. That would also be really lovely, whether that's an online friend or that it's on in real life. Although obviously please stay safe, don't actively go up to them at a time like this. But if you know somebody that would be interested in listening to Get In The Mecha, any of the episodes, not just this one, then please tell them about it. I think that's not just a win for me, but that's also a win for them too, because who doesn't love a podcast which they can enjoy? And I sure do too. So that is it. I'm just going to sign out here. It has been insanely fun doing this episode, and I hope to see you next week. I have been your host Jamal today, and this has been Get In The Mecha. The music in this production goes as follows: Synthwave by Alex McCulloch, Mandatory Overtime by Joth, and Anomaly by Eric Matyas under soundimage.org.